With Chainsaw Man chapter 168, we pick up where the last one left off, but the brilliance with making such a decision is that you can continue to ride that rock hard emotional high filled with a bunch of uncomfortable moments that literally end it with the release of passion, but in doing so, it makes the readers miss a very subtle sign of foreshadowing that is tucked away at the end of the chapter that is meant to implant a suggestion in your mind to start thinking about the final of the four horsewomen, the Death Devil herself. So backing things up a bit, we open up with Yoru and she's still in control, and we see her looking down at her hand, which is, for lack of better words, covered in the fluids of Denji. And what's interesting here is the backdrop of the rain falling and Denji lowering his head, something that you normally associate with shame, but in this case it is confusion on the part of Denji. And what I like about this is that Fujimoto, he continues to embrace the awkwardness of the entire situation instead of running away from it. We see it all on all sides here. Yoru is saying how gross it is, and she's washing her hand of Denji's baby batter in the water, and she's telling him to not get the wrong idea because she only kissed him because it felt like it would be a good idea. And when Denji starts to ask for clarification about what's really going on here, Yoru's facial expressions, that really sells the whole thing over the top, and it makes this whole situation really good writing, because as she's telling him to not get cocky, those eyes, they are wide with emotion, and she looks like she has a wide array of emotions inside of her. Our first sign that things here are not what they seem, and there's more to it than Yoru's letting on. And your knee-jerk reactions go, well, Yoru, she has shown tsundere tendencies before, where she's pretty harsh, and in Yoru's case, she is extremely harsh, but as we've seen, she has signs in her that she might have a softer side that is hidden behind all the crudeness and savagery that we've seen, like how she hinted at being bullied in the devil world. Fujimoto further leans into it by having Yoru stare at Denji's mouth and kiss him yet again, but not before her eyes, they're zoomed in on one panel, and you can see there's a war going on inside of them. Really good art here. So Mitaka, she's the one who really likes Denji, and Yoru, who at this point is walking a fine line of being another Makima who is using Denji to get what she wants, but also being potentially affected by Mitaka's intense feelings for Denji. And what makes this moment where Yoru further plays with Denji's mind so intense, because she breaks the kiss and she straight up tells Denji that she doesn't like him. And you have to feel for Denji right now, because Yoru is a walking mixed signal right now. She is the last type of woman that you want to date, at least in my experience. Or rather, when you look at it from Denji's perspective, Mitaka is not only a walking mixed signal, but she is also coming off as just being batshit crazy. For Denji, dealing with women who are crazy, that's nothing new. It's kind of up his alley. The guy, he survived Himeno, who threw up in his mouth. He survived Reze, who was emotionally damaged, but she ended up catching feelings for him. There were no romantic feelings there with Power at the end of the series, but Power, as we all know, she had a few screws loose. And Makima, she inflicted so much emotional trauma on Denji that he deserves a free pass into heaven just for having survived the natural category 5 gaslighting hurricane known as Makima. However, here he's got a girl who is saying that she doesn't like him, but she just gave him a hand job and she kissed him right before, during, and after it. And she's telling him that, hey, don't get the wrong idea. My other half likes you, and I can feel her feelings flowing into me. Put yourself in Denji's shoes for a second. You would think that she is crazy. I know I would. And that's the big reveal for us in this chapter. We already knew that the connection between Yoru and Mitaka was growing strong as more time went on, but this cements it further down for us in a major way, because what started out in early part 2 of Mitaka's thoughts being able to flow into Yoru to a point where she's telling her, hey, don't even dare try and contact the devil hunter or else I just end everything here. Well, now we're seeing it that it's a two-way street at this point in the story. Yoru, when she's in control of Mitaka's body, she's not only aware of her emotions, but Mitaka can directly affect Yoru through her emotions, which that is very interesting, and that's not something that you turn your eyes to. This will not be the last time that we see the emotions of Mitaka and the love that she has for Denji begin to start creeping up. But the only question is, how big of a bullet in that chamber of the narrative in terms of that Chekhov's gun there are those feelings going to actually serve? Is this going to have a potential impact that Nayuta is being set up to have, where we know chaos is coming with Nayuta at some point? Like in the last chapter, we were made aware that she was still out there without really seeing her. Or is this going to be something even bigger? Is Nayuta a Chekhov's gun, and is Yoru just a figurative nuclear warhead ready to go off? For now, only time will truly tell here. As Yoru heads off to the sushi bar, Denji is left sitting in the alley completely mind blown and trying to digest everything that just happened, with the rain having finally stopped, which is yet another purposeful intention by Fujimoto narratively here. The figurative rainstorm started before the storm hit. The storm itself was Yoru and Denji in their encounter, and now Denji is left to his thoughts, having survived the storm that he just got hit with. In writing, your background is just as important as your characters in the story itself, so future writers take note of that. Fujimoto is once again throughout the series showing us over and over again that he understands the importance of backgrounds, but this set of chapters here is probably the best that he's done in the entirety of Chainsaw Man, having to go all the way back to the Bomb Devil arc with all that stuff going on at Reze before we can even get to something comparable. We then shift over and we see a really interesting scene take place as Yoru is walking away. It starts out with just Yoru walking, but when you get to the bottom panel, you see a manifestation of Mitaka right behind Yoru, and she is absolutely pissed off and is setting more layers up for the eventual battle that these two that we're about to see unfold. Mitaka lays into Yoru here. She slams her head against the side of the wall, and Yoru is telling Mitaka cut it out, telling her to stop. But what's interesting here is what this represents. We saw it in the breakout of Denji at the detention center. Mitaka is getting more control over her body. They're switching back and forth, and they're doing so seamlessly, and at times it looks like Mitaka is even able to force herself to the surface. And what we see here is that she slams her own head against the wall, and Yoru is the one telling her to stop. If we go back to the beginning of Chainsaw Man Part 2, it wouldn't have been this strong of a dynamic. This won't be the last time we see these two at odds either, and while we've seen it before, again, this moment is just a precursor to more of what's coming in the future. Mitaka demands to know why Yoru kissed Denji, and when Yoru says that she just wanted to confirm her suspicion and that they had kissed before, Mitaka balls up her fist and she slams it into her own head to attack Yoru. When Yoru demands to know why she's hitting her because she thought that Mitaka liked Chainsaw Man, we see what was alluded to in chapter 167, which is the whole time that Yoru was rubbing little Denji Jr. trying to get a release out of him, Mitaka was the one conflicted because it was her body, and her reaction here shows the conflict. She is worried that Denji's going to look at her as a slut now, and she flat out calls Yoru a slut for her actions because she did kind of give it up easy, and Mitaka leans against the wall in absolute pain and agony before finally giving in and walking over to the train so they can go to the sushi bar, which just ends up setting the stage for the two big WTF moments that you see at the end of the chapter. So after we get that uncomfortable train ride where Mitaka is embarrassed because she doesn't want to sit down even next to Denji, another sign by the narrative to make you start thinking this will, no pun intended, not be a happy ending for their characters. We see the sushi bar that is called Death by Sushi, and it's a very intentional seed that's planted here to make you think about the Death Devil without actually having to say a Death Devil's name at all. Death by Sushi is clever enough that you wouldn't think about it twice, but that's the hidden meaning here, and it makes you wonder, are we in that situation where the long-awaited Death Devil, the being who Fami has been trying to power up Yoru and Denji to fight against, is now finally looming around the corner, potentially sooner than they anticipated? We'll obviously have to wait and see until after our motley crew has filled their stomachs up with sushi, but it is a bold choice by Fujimoto to close his chapter off in this way. If this is the direction that Fujimoto is going, to have the Death Devil come around the corner, I honestly think that it does work. Part of what made Chainsaw Man Part 1 so great is that just when you thought it couldn't get any worse, it literally did. Denji and company, they survived the trauma, the darkness devil, and we saw scenes like Power being afraid to go to sleep without Denji nearby, and Denji bathing with Power for the first time in the series, not viewing her as a sex object, which for a guy like Denji, that is saying a lot because he's eternally horny. And before they can fully emerge out of, no pun intended, the darkness and despair, we see the Gun Devil arc take place, and that was the arc that ended up placing the rocket ship onto the back of Chainsman's narrative and started propelling us towards the climax of Chainsman Part 1 story. Assuming Part 2 of Chainsman goes for a similar length, now would be the time, if we're going to be honest here. We're 168 chapters into the story. We're less than 30 chapters away from doubling the length of Part 1 of the story. But if Fujimoto continues to slow it down and keep focusing on some of the character drama like we see in this chapter itself, I trust that he's got something pretty major and nasty in store for us to traumatize us as readers. Because right now, if this was a kitchen, Fujimoto is that guy who has every eye on the stove completely covered with pots and pans. He's got 2 different meals cooking in the oven simultaneously, and he's got something ready to go in the microwave to heat up once the main dish has been cooked. I am really excited to see where this goes, and I hope you guys are too. Chainsaw Man is going to be on break for the next 14 days, so be on the lookout for the Dating Denji full story video, and in the meantime, feel free to click here for these other videos you see on the screen right now.